Hi, welcome to my channel. This is a video about veganism. You are watching part 3 of the video. In this video, we are discussing the environmental impact of the food that we consume. I hope you will like it. So let's get started. Is eating meat bad for the environment? When you look more closely at the food sector's environmental impact, you can see that meat and dairy are the major factors. Worldwide, livestock accounts for between 14.5 and 18% of human-induced greenhouse gas emissions. When it comes to other warming gases, agriculture is one of the leading contributors to both methane and nitrous oxide emissions. Matt McGrath, BBC Environment correspondent. Livestock uses 83% of farmland and produces 60% of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, it provides just 18% of the food calories and 37% of protein required by humans. Meat accounts for nearly 60% of all greenhouse gases from food production, study finds. The global production of food is responsible for a third of all planet-heating gases emitted by human activity, with the use of animals for meat causing twice the pollution of producing plant-based foods, a major new study has found. The entire system of food production, such as the use of farming machinery, spraying of fertilizer, and transportation of products, causes 17.3 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases a year, according to the research. This enormous release of gases that fuel the climate crisis is more than double the entire emissions of the US and represents 35% of all global emissions, researchers said. The use of cows, pigs, and other animals for food, as well as livestock feed, is responsible for 57% of all food production emissions, the research found, with 29% coming from the cultivation of plant-based foods. The rest comes from other uses of land, such as for cotton or rubber. Beef alone accounts for a quarter of emissions produced by raising and growing food. Grazing animals require a lot of land, which is often cleared through the felling of forests, as well as vast tracts of additional land to grow their feed. The paper calculates that the majority of all the world's cropland is used to feed livestock, rather than people. Livestock also produce large quantities of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. The difference in emissions between meat and plant production is stark. To produce 1 kilogram of wheat, 2.5 kilograms of greenhouse gases are emitted. A single kilo of beef, meanwhile, creates 70 kilograms of emissions. 1/4 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions result from food and agriculture. When it comes to tackling climate change, the focus tends to be on clean energy solutions, the deployment of renewable or nuclear energy, improvements in energy efficiency, or transition to low-carbon transport. Indeed, energy, whether in the form of electricity, heat, transport, or industrial processes, accounts for the majority 76% of greenhouse gas emissions. But the global food system, which encompasses production and post-farm processes such as processing and distribution, is also a key contributor to emissions. Food is responsible for approximately 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Supply chains account for 18% of food emissions. Livestock and fisheries account for 31% of food emissions. Crop production accounts for 27% of food emissions. Land use accounts for 24% of food emissions. How does meat consumption affect the environment? Large-scale meat production not only has a negative impact on the local environment, it also has significant implications in terms of climate change inputs. Animal wastes release two potent greenhouse gases, methane and nitrous oxide. Methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide, while nitrous oxide is a whopping 300 times more potent than the carbon dioxide released from burning fossil fuels. The global demand for meat is an extremely significant contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions, and it is one of the main reasons why emissions are continuing to rise at the rate that they are. Most of the meat produced for human consumption comes from intensive breeding of livestock in factory farms, also known as concentrated animal feeding operations. Globalization and climate change have increased the demand for meat all over the world. Global production systems are set to create a surge in demand for red meat and poultry by 2050, equivalent to an extra 12 million tons of meat each year. One of the biggest issues with meat production is that it requires massive amounts of feed, which are made from soybeans or other grains. The amount of demand for livestock feed is not sustainable for the environment. Livestock also eats food crops directly as their main source of food. Global meat production requires 80% of all soybeans produced globally to be fed directly to livestock. The environmental impact is huge, both in terms of greenhouse gases, emissions, and deforestation. One important aspect is how much water it takes to produce 1 calorie of protein from different types of protein sources. Why meat is bad for the environment? It causes deforestation and forest fires. Industrial meat is the single biggest cause of deforestation globally. In Brazil, farmers are deliberately setting forest fires, as the Amazon rainforest fires you may have seen in the news, to clear space for cattle ranching and to grow industrial animal feed, like soya, for farms back in the UK. It causes climate change. The climate impact of meat is enormous, roughly equivalent to all the driving and flying of every car, truck, and plane in the world. When forests are destroyed to produce industrial meat, billions of tons of carbon dioxide are released into the atmosphere, accelerating global warming. The fallen trees are often left to rot on the forest floor or are burned, creating further emissions. It's pushing the Amazon rainforest closer to a tipping point. Trees in the Amazon rainforest produce their rainfall, which keeps the whole forest alive and healthy. If deforestation, for things like industrial meat, continues at the current rate, the Amazon could reach a tipping point where it can no longer sustain itself as a rainforest. This would have a devastating impact on the people and animals who live in, or depend on, the forest directly. It's killing wildlife. By clearing forests, destroying habitats, and using toxic pesticide to grow animal food, the industrial meat industry is contributing to the extinction of thousands of species, many of which haven't even been discovered yet. We depend on a healthy environment for our survival. The huge abundance and variety of the natural world, sometimes called biodiversity, are essential for food, clean water, and medicines. The rapid loss of biodiversity, largely driven by industrial farming, could be as big a threat to our existence as climate change. It's increasing the risk of future pandemics. Destroying forests and other wild areas for animal agriculture is a major cause of new infectious diseases. 3/4 of new diseases affecting humans come from animals. Cutting down and burning forests brings wildlife into closer contact with people, enabling deadly viruses to pass from animals to humans. The more forest that is destroyed, the greater the risk of a new pandemic. It's an inefficient way to eat. Over a quarter of the world's entire land area is used to graze or grow food for farm animals, food that could have been eaten by people in the first place. Just 1 kilogram of chicken meat takes 3.2 kilograms of crops to produce. Can switching to a plant-based diet really save the planet? Avoiding meat and dairy products is the single biggest way to reduce your environmental impact on the planet, according to the scientists behind the most comprehensive analysis to date of the damage farming does to the planet. The new research shows that without meat and dairy consumption, global farmland use could be reduced by more than 75%, an area equivalent to the US, China, European Union, and Australia combined, and still feed the world. The loss of wild areas to agriculture is the leading cause of the current mass extinction of wildlife. The new analysis shows that while meat and dairy provide just 18% of calories and 37% of protein, they use the vast majority, 83% of farmland, and produce 60% of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions. Other recent research shows 86% of all land mammals are now livestock or humans. The scientists also found that even the very lowest impact meat and dairy products still cause much more environmental harm than the least sustainable vegetable and cereal growing. The study, published in the journal Science, created a huge dataset based on almost 40,000 farms in 119 countries and covering 40 food products that represent 90% of all that is eaten. It assessed the full impact of these foods, from farm to fork, on land use, climate change emissions, freshwater use, and water pollution, eutrophication, and air pollution, acidification. A vegan diet is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on planet Earth, not just greenhouse gases, but global acidification, eutrophication, land use and water use, said Joseph Pure, at the University of Oxford, UK, who led the research. It is far bigger than cutting down on your flights or buying an electric car, he said, as these only cut greenhouse gas emissions. Land use. The expansion of land for agriculture is the leading driver of deforestation and biodiversity loss. The land use of livestock is so large because it takes around 100 times as much land to produce a kilocalorie of beef or lamb versus plant-based alternatives. The same is also true for protein. It takes almost 100 times as much land to produce a gram of protein from beef or lamb versus peas or tofu. One concern is whether we would be able to grow enough food for everyone on the cropland that is left. The research suggests that it's possible to feed everyone in the world a nutritious diet on existing croplands, but only if we saw a widespread shift towards plant-based diets. Half of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture. There is also a highly unequal distribution of land use between livestock and crops for human consumption. If we combine pastures used for grazing with land used to grow crops for animal feed, livestock accounts for 77% of global farming land. While livestock takes up most of the world's agricultural land, it only produces 18% of the world's calories and 37% of total protein. More plant-based diets tend to need less cropland. If we would shift towards a more plant-based diet, we don't only need less agricultural land overall, we also need less cropland. This might go against our intuition. If we substitute beans, peas, tofu, and cereals for meat and dairy, surely we would need more cropland to grow them? As we see, almost 3/4 of this land is used as pasture, the remaining quarter is cropland. 5 If we combine pastures and cropland for animal feed, around 80% of all agricultural land is used for meat and dairy production. This has a large impact on how land requirements change as we shift towards a more plant-based diet. In the hypothetical scenario in which the entire world adopted a vegan diet, the researchers estimate that our total agricultural land use would shrink from 4.1 billion hectares to 1 billion hectares. A reduction of 75%. That's equal to an area the size of North America and Brazil combined. Deforestation. Every year the world loses around 5 million hectares of forest. 95% of this occurs in the tropics. At least 3/4 of this is driven by agriculture, clearing forests to grow crops, raise livestock, and produce products such as paper. Brazil and Indonesia account for almost half of tropical deforestation. In the chart, we see the share of tropical deforestation by country and region. It's measured as the annual average between 2010 and 2014. 1/3 of tropical deforestation happened in Brazil. That was 1.7 million hectares each year. The other single country where large forest areas are lost is Indonesia. It accounted for 14%. This means around half, 47%, of tropical deforestation took place in Brazil and Indonesia. The expansion of pasture lands have also had a major impact on land use in the rest of the Americas. Outside of Brazil, Latin America accounted for around 1/5 of deforestation. The expansion of agricultural land in Africa accounted for around 17.5% of deforestation. Beef, soy, and palm oil are responsible for 60% of tropical deforestation. In the chart here we see the breakdown of tropical deforestation by the types of agricultural production. The expansion of pasture land to raise cattle was responsible for 41% of tropical deforestation. That's 2.1 million hectares yearly, about half the size of the Netherlands. Most of this converted land came from Brazil. Its expansion of beef production accounts for 1/4, 24%, of tropical deforestation. This also means that most, 72%, of deforestation in Brazil is driven by cattle ranching. Cattle in other parts of Latin America, such as Argentina and Paraguay, also accounted for a large amount of deforestation, 11% of the total. Most deforestation for beef therefore occurs in Latin America, with another 4% happening in Africa. Palm oil and soy often claim the headlines for their environmental impact. They are categorized as oilseeds, which dominated by soybean and palm oil. They drove 18% of deforestation. Combined, beef and oilseeds account for nearly 60% of deforestation. Soy bean. More than 3/4, 77%, of global soy is fed to livestock for meat and dairy production. Most of the rest is used for biofuels, industry, or vegetable oils. Just 7% of soy is used directly for human food products such as tofu, soy milk, edamame beans, and tempeh. The idea that foods often promoted as substitutes for meat and dairy, such as tofu in soy milk, are driving deforestation as a common misconception. Global soy production has exploded over the past 50 years. Global production today is more than 13 times higher than it was in the early 1960s. Even since the year 2000, production has more than doubled. In the chart here we see the change in global soybean production from 1961 onwards. Back in the 1960s, we were producing 20 to 30 million tons per year. This is now 350 million tons. Most of the world's soy comes from only two countries, the US, 123 million tons, and Brazil, 118 million tons. Combined, they account for more than two-thirds, 69%, of global soy production. Dairy versus plant-based milk. Milk is a dietary staple across many countries in the world. But dairy can contribute a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions of our food. There is now a range of plant-based milk alternatives available, including soy, oat, almond, rice, and coconut. In the chart here we compare milks across a number of environmental metrics: land use, greenhouse gas emissions, water use, and eutrophication, the pollution of ecosystems with excess nutrients. These are compared per liter of milk. Cow's milk has significantly higher impacts than the plant-based alternatives across all metrics. It causes around 3 times as much greenhouse gas emissions, uses around 10 times as much land, 2 to 20 times as much fresh water, and creates much higher levels of eutrophication. Global freshwater use. Globally, 70% of freshwater withdrawals are used for agriculture. However, water requirements vary significantly depending on food type. The charts show the global average freshwater withdrawals in liters per kilogram of food product. Meat production costs the earth. The animal agricultural industry is responsible for a wide range of environmental impacts, including its role as the single largest cause of deforestation. For animals to be raised and food to be grown to feed these animals, extensive areas of rainforest are burned and cleared every year. Meat production is also responsible for using vast amounts of water, with 1 kilogram of beef, for example, requiring over 15,000 liters of water, and 1 kilogram of chicken requiring over 4,000 liters of water. In addition to this, the animal agriculture industry is responsible for at least 16.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. These emissions primarily come from cattle burps, dairy and pig manure, animal feed production, and land use change. Although poultry farming is responsible for fewer emissions, all plant-based proteins are far lower in emissions, including healthy sources like legumes, seeds and nuts and tofu. In addition, poultry processing is responsible for higher levels of animal suffering, on top of labor rights abuses and contributions to air and water pollution. Quotes. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. Charles Darwin. Our task must be to free ourselves, by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. Albert Einstein. The worst sin toward our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. That's the essence of inhumanity. George Bernard Shaw. As long as men massacre animals, they will kill each other. Indeed, he who sows the seeds of murder and pain cannot reap the joy of love. Pythagoras. It is just like man's vanity and impertinence to call an animal dumb because it is dumb to his dull perceptions. Mark Twain. The question is not, can they reason? Nor can they talk? But, can they suffer? Why should the law refuse its protection to any sensitive being? Jeremy Bentham. We consume the carcasses of creatures of like appetites, passions and organs with our own, and fill the slaughterhouses daily with screams of pain and fear. Robert Louis Stevenson. The animals of the world exist for their own reasons. They were not made for humans any more than black people were made for white, or women created for men. Alice Walker. Peace. I feel physically a man can live and be healthy without killing animals for food. Therefore, if he eats meat, he participates in taking animal life merely for the sake of his appetite. And to act so is immoral. Leo Tolstoy. Animal cruelty is one of the most unfortunate and barbaric demonstrations of human beings manipulating ill-conceived notions of power over other species. Ian Somerhalder. Being vegan truly is the secret to my life's joy and peace. I feel physically and spiritually better than I could have ever imagined, knowing that I am doing everything I can to reduce animal suffering with simple lifestyle choices like being vegan, never wearing any products made from animals, like wool and leather, and buying only from companies that never test their products or ingredients on animals. Alicia Silverstone. I am very touched on a deep level by cruelty to animals. Ali McGrath. People get offended by animal rights campaigns. It's ludicrous. It's not as bad as mass animal death in a factory. Richard Gere. Every year tens of thousands of animals suffer and die in laboratory tests of cosmetics and household products, despite the fact that the test results do not help prevent or treat accidental or purposeful misuse of the products. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. I hold that the more helpless a creature, the more entitled it is to protection by man from the cruelty of humankind. Mahatma Gandhi. The most violent weapon on earth is the table fork. Mahatma Gandhi. Here are some documentaries and books related to veganism, health, environment. Earthlings. Forks over knives. Live and let live. Cowspiracy, the sustainability secret. What the health? Land of hope and glory. The game changes. Dominion. Seaspiracy. Eating our way to extinction. Live to 100. Secrets of the blue zones. You are what you eat. A twin experiment. The China Study, the most comprehensive study of nutrition ever conducted by T. Colin Campbell and Thomas M. Campbell. How Not to Die by Michael Greger with Gene Stone. The Blue Zone Secrets for Living Longer by Dan Buettner. Forks Over Knives, The Plant-Based Way to Health by T. Colin Campbell, Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Gene Stone. Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows by Melanie Joy. This is Vegan Propaganda, and Other Lies the Meat Industry Tells You, by Ed Winters. Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. Eat for the Planet, Saving the World One Bite at a Time by Gene Stone and Neil Zacharias. Proteinaholic by Garth Davis with Howard Jacobson. The Plant-Based Athlete by marathoner Matt Frazier and bodybuilder Robert Cheek. No Meat Athlete by Matt Frazier. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel and share the video. Also, you can watch my other videos.